Welcome everyone to our student engagement workshop. Just as a reminder, this is our first workshop of our monthly series.
I don't know when to stop.
Talk about that in another moment. Thank you, Michelle, and welcome. So very much want to welcome you all to our TGR Edu Create workshops. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jason Porter. I'm Director of Programs. I'm working in professional development with a lot of our other team that's here, and you're going to get a chance to meet at least some of them here in a little bit. So absolutely want to invite everyone to turn on your cameras if you have that opportunity so we can work together and work interactively. Also, you can go ahead and mute yourselves, which I think everyone else has done already here in the beginning, and then we're going to unmute, and when there's a time to share and talk with each other, we'll unmute and get started. So just one other reminder, so you can see our social tags there. So please go ahead and share over Facebook or Twitter or what have you. Your experiences here today, anything that you want to share, please tag us. We'd love to have you do that. So Jess, if you want to give the next page. So just a reminder, this is for those of you who joined us this summer, and even if you didn't, this is the start of our monthly workshops where we're going to continue to support educators as we go month through month here. So this is our September workshop. Really excited to be talking with all of you about engagement. And then moving forward into October, November, and all the way up through June 2021, we're going to be having monthly workshops. And these workshops are meant to support you in skills that you've learned from the summer to take forward, bite-sized skills within those workshops that you can act on the next day and that pertain to the teaching situation and the work that you're doing this year. So really meant to be an opportunity to kind of move the skills forward and all of us to learn and work together and build our community of educators. So very glad for those who could join this first in the series. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. So instead of listening to me for a long time, you're in for a treat because you get to listen to my colleague Jessica. So I'll turn it over to Jess. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. It's afternoon here, so I'm just going to say good afternoon, good day. So excited that you guys were able to make it in today. We know at the start of the school year, it could be super busy and crazy. So we are highly privileged to have you guys spend a little bit of time with us today to talk about student engagement. I'm going to skip forward just a little bit. I am Jessica Kessler. I'm going to be your professional development facilitator today. My background, just so you know, has been in K-12 education. I've taught from 4th grade to 12th grade, predominantly science supported areas, as well as chemistry and educational leadership. And I love reading, love science, love facilitating these workshops, so I'm super excited to get going. Additionally, we have basically our entire almost everybody on our Create team here with us today. We are a small but mighty team of 6 now that provide professional development and programming for educators, specifically around how to create these interdisciplinary, student-centered, STEM-related, college access, cross-curricular connected lessons and pedagogical tools and practices. So you've already met Jason, who's going to be co-hosting with me today and really going to be supporting, but the rest of the team, David's here, so David can give a wave, as well as Holly is there, she can give a wave, and Carmen is there as well. All of them are going to be here, so if at any time you have any questions about what we do, who we are, any of the content that is presented today, feel free to reach out to any one of us, and we'll also be around afterwards, caveat, for Create Cafe. So after the workshop is over, we're going to stick around for a little while and have an open discussion about anything that you saw here today, or just any topics or things that you want to discuss education related. We are all here to support and discuss any of those things with you. All right, so going into our norms, like Jason said, everybody is on mute just so that we can avoid background noises, but we would love to see your face if your camera is on, and we would love to hear from you, whether in the chat or on the mic. So at any time during this workshop, especially because we're a little bit small starting off, feel free to raise your hand, type a question in the chat box, unmute yourself, and just say, hey, what about this? And we would love to get that interaction going. All right, so keep that in mind as we go. Today, you're going to see some of these icons that are related to the activities that we're going to do today. So you'll see the blue people because we're going to be breaking out into breakout groups today. We're going to be doing some work in some Google Sheets, really collaborating on some engagement ideas and equations. We're also going to be using Padlet, and of course, we're going to be using that chat box and our mics to share out as much as possible and really get the collaboration going today. So our agenda is really simple, but there's a lot that you'll see in each one of these topics. So we're really going to start off kind of reviewing the types of engagement. For those of you who have been with us before and talking about engagement, we're just going to get a refresher on some of the things that we have pinpointed before as super impactful in understanding when defining engagement. Then we're going to go into what does that look like? How do you identify these practices in class, whether in person or digitally? And then we're going to get into this really cool and funky engagement equation, which we're going to break down and really get into. That's going to be like our meat and potatoes for those of you who like steak dinners, like I do. So let's get started. And this first question is really for you guys to share out in the chat, just for all of us to kind of share out what has been your definition of engagement. So if you were an administrator or a teacher leader and you were doing a 15-minute observation, which is often the case for our administrators or teacher leaders, how would you define engagement? Even as a teacher, for someone who has been observed before, how have you discussed and defined engagement with other teachers or your administrative team? So I'm going to let people share out in the chat box. However, if you would like to unmute yourself, feel free to do so. That might be a little bit easier for you. How do you or how have you defined engagement? Feel free to just unmute yourself and jump in or type it into the chat box if you're comfortable. Wait time is great time. So I'm just going to let you sit on that and just, let the wheels turn. Thank you, Maria, for being the first one out the gate. So active participation. I love that. Being hands-on. Thank you, Carla. Movement, being active, collaborating. You can definitely see those. Anyone else? Anyone want to unmute themselves and jump in? Even on our Create team, feel free to jump in. As you were educators, which most of us have been, how did you first define engagement? When students and teachers are actively interacting with each other. Okay. Love that. Students are focused. I love that because that's more of the skill, right? Being focused, being able, especially if we're just talking about our virtual environments, right? Having students be focused. Creating, I was waiting for Christian to bring up something really profound. So I have high expectations, Christian. Creating a student-centered environment where students can be proactive in their learning. I love that word, proactive. Christian never lets me down. An arrangement to do something at a certain time. Okay, Robert, thank you. All right. So I love these. Oops, I'm focusing on students, not teacher. Got you. The only one talking, not the teacher being the only one talking. I appreciate that. Thank you for clarifying. I love all of these, right? And for so long, engagement has kind of been this mystical thing, right? Where it's like you walk into a classroom and someone's like, oh, 75% of your students are engaged. And you're like, oh, really? How did you know? But so-and-so was doing this and such was doing that. So what is engagement really? And over the past year, our team has really been breaking down and researching this engagement and trying to get to the bottom of what engagement is and speaking about it in with some common language. And we have discovered that there are actually more than one way to be engaged. And that engagement is actually broken down into these 3 different dimensions, all of which come together to culminate into the engagement that we hope to see with our students. And this diagram and these definitions that you're going to see were adapted from Engagement by Design. Highly suggest the book. It's awesome. It has a lot of tools and a lot of great points, especially when talking about engagement, which we're going to use today. So I highly recommend that you take a look at it. So let's start taking a look at these different dimensions. And as we go through these dimensions, I would love to see in the chat box any aha moments, any, oh, that's interesting, or any questions that you might have as we go through these different dimensions of engagement. So behavioral engagement, this is often commonly the most referred to. This is the one that we most often can observe in a classroom. Is, are students on task? Are they participating in the classroom or the school environment? Are they being compliant with the norms? And are they being active participants in what's happening not only in your classroom, but in all of their learning environment, meaning the entire school, that will lead to their academic and social success? And again, this is the one that we most often see. So in a 15-minute observation, I'm most likely to come into your classroom and say, hey, a good number of your students were on task, they were participating, they were actively engaged, and that is great stuff to see. But some of the other dimensions might be a little bit more challenging to observe just off of that one observation, which could be their emotional engagement. And this is a student's comfort and connection with his or her school, the teachers, and peers that empowers the student to build relationship and strive for academic success. So this not only means that students are doing what is on task, you know, they're writing that paper or they're typing that essay out or anything like that. That means that they feel comfortable talking to their teacher. I don't understand what's going on. They are comfortable in explaining to their peers, you know, I don't know what this means. Maybe we should ask for help. They're okay with making mistakes because they know they have a supportive environment where they can continue to thrive. So this is really about that emotional attachment that students have that often lead to their behavioral engagement as well, because these emotional indicators make a student feel comfortable to the point where they can engage fully behaviorally in their academic learning environment. And then we have their cognitive engagement. And this is the one that every teacher is striving for, right? We want students to be cognitively engaged. We want their minds to be turning at all points in our lessons because we spend so long planning them out that we really, really want students to be thinking at every aspect. So cognitive engagement is really about students being able to meet those rigorous academic expectations. And even meeting those expectations, but wanting more, desiring new challenges, and continuing their quest for knowledge and success. And this is really mind-blowing sometimes when you take a look at student engagement, because it's not only them being on task in the moment, it's not just meeting that expectation at that time, is wanting more. It's that student who's reaching out to you later like, oh, Ms. K, do you know any other books I could read about this topic? Or is there a TED Talk about this? Or can I watch a YouTube video later? Or can you recommend something? It's students wanting more. Oh, can I get some more of those balance and equation problems? I love when kids ask me for that. But it's really about students desiring more than just what's given to them. And that is when you're like, oh my gosh, we love teaching because, oh my gosh, did he just ask me for more work? Yes, right. So that's how you know students are getting more cognitively engaged. So I'm looking over at the chat box. Any comments, thoughts, questions related to these dimensions of engagement? Anything you want to share out? How have you observed them or considered these even in your planning or your teaching? Would love to hear some share outs or to see some chats come in. So I'll pause. Feel free to unmute yourself. Feel free to share it out in the chat box, whatever you're comfortable with.
You know, one thing I was just thinking, I've seen this before. I think I went to one of your webinars this summer, but that seems like years ago, doesn't it? For what we're all going through. But, you know, if you think about it, when I'm a coach, but even when an admin comes in or a coach, what are we mostly looking at for engagement? It's the behavior. Exactly. So I just like, all of a sudden I went light bulb, more than the emotional or cognitive. We're hoping that if they're engaged behaviorally, that's helping with their cognitive, but are we really looking at their cognitive engagement? Like, I'm just like, all of a sudden it hit me.
Light bulb moment. I love that, Carla. Thank you so much. And that's true, right? I mean, as an administrator, and we have a couple people who have been in administrative roles on this call right now. But you walk in, you have 15 minutes and you have to go through this checklist and you're just like, our students pen in hand and focus, right? And that's really that first thing. But when you start talking to students and to really start getting into what it is that they're doing, you'll find that even that student with a pencil in their hand sometimes doesn't know what they're doing, right? They're coming up with the wrong answer. So are they really cognitively engaged? Did they feel comfortable enough to say they didn't understand what was going on and ask for help? And that's emotional engagement. So definitely a lot to consider underneath that behavioral engagement layer. So thank you, Carla, for sharing out. And thank you, Robert, for that comment that, you know, really exhaustively defining this, right? Trying to peel back the layers of this onion. If you don't like onions, maybe it's a parfait for all my Shrek friends. Carl, also, or just being compliant and getting through the day, right? Because some students do that. Some students just want to avoid the drama of having to engage with a teacher or get in trouble. So they're just like, what do I need to do to just make it through today? Drama free, right? And they will comply behaviorally, but all underneath, they might not be emotionally or cognitively engaged, right? Which means, how much are they really getting from the class? Are they really understanding the concept? And that's what this is all pointing to, is if our students aren't engaged in these areas, are they getting the optimal learning experience possible? Okay, so thank you, Jason, for pinning this PDF. So there's a PDF document that Jason just linked into the chat that has this laid out for you, so that you guys can take this with you, really, really harp on some of these definitions and think about it and use it as we continue forward with the workshop as well. So that being said, just like Carla was mentioning, you know, how do you walk into a classroom and say these students are engaged in all of these areas? The behavioral one is a little bit easier to understand, but you know, what could I look for as a teacher or someone coming in to support a teacher to be able to say, emotional engagement is here, cognitive engagement is here, and behavioral engagement is here? So I want us to think about that and share out our thoughts. How could you observe these things with your students? So Jason is going to share a link to our Padlet. And in our Padlet, the Padlet looks very, very simple because you guys are going to put in all the magic. But in this Padlet, you're just going to see the 3 types of engagement listed here at the top. And what I would love for you to do is, now that you know those definitions and now that you're thinking about engagement in these different ways, I would love for you to add a comment that really points to how could you identify this type of engagement? What are some indicators here? So behavioral engagement, the first one that I can write is always the one that's top of mind, is being on task. That's how I know students are, at least at the very minimum, behaviorally engaged. So I'm going to give you guys about 5 or 6 minutes, and I would love for you to add as many comments as you would like to this Padlet about how could you identify cognitive engagement? How could you identify emotional engagement? What are some things that you could look for in these different areas that will let you know students are engaged? Okay, I'm going to be quiet now and allow you to think and process, and go ahead and add as much stuff as you want to this Padlet page. And type in as many as you can think of. Oh, I love these. And if you agree with something that somebody says, there's a little heart here that you can click on that lets them know that you agree or that you like what they said. So feel free to take a look at what other people are writing, and share some likes. Also think about both sets of environments. How could this look different virtually, compared to in person? We're going to give us about 1 to 2 more minutes. So as people are finishing up their comments, I would love to hear anything that stood out to you from someone else, or that you had an aha moment when you wrote it, from our participants as well as our team. If you see anything that was like, that was super on point or interesting, feel free to call it out. There was one that came up earlier from emotional engagement about this one right here: smiling, nodding, being comfortable adding their opinion, right? Because when students are just happy to be in your class, right, that shows you a level of emotional engagement or connection that they have with you. When they're like, "Good morning, Miss K, I'm so excited for class today," you know, it just sparks something inside you that lets you know these students are really comfortable with you and ready to get learning. I love that.
Jess, I really like one of the comments. Students can teach and support other students with the content. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, students are like, "Miss K, you take a break. I'm gonna take this one over," right? And they jump in. And they jump in and take over. I still actually have video from one of my favorite pain in the butt students who would joke around all day. I literally have a video of him saying, "I'm going to teach the class how to balance this chemical equation." And he literally just went up there and just went crazy and taught everything. And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, best moment of my life." And I still have the video. It's amazing. Some of these other ones, behavioral engagement, which we kind of touched on, you know, attending events at school, right? That's something so simple, but for students who are not attending events at school, does that say something about their comfort with the school? Do they feel a part of the school? That just gives you some insight to what might be going on emotionally and cognitively. Completing their daily prompts, you know, work being completed on time. Definitely some indicators of behavioral engagement. Cognitive, I see, imitating, I think, is initiating new realms of investigation. I love that. Bringing in examples from their own hobbies and experiences, right? They're making connections beyond what you're just giving them. Deeper conversations, sharing their knowledge. Love it. Willing to admit and make mistakes. Love that. When students feel so comfortable, they're like, "You know what, Miss K, I got this wrong, and I think I know where I got it wrong." And they're like able to share that and not embarrassed, right? That really lets you know they feel comfortable in that environment. I love that. Willing to turn on cameras and talk out loud on Zoom. That's a big one right now, right? If kids don't feel emotionally connected or engaged, They're just going to, you know, screen off, rename themselves, reconnecting, and just try to sit in the back and not say anything for their entire class period. And we definitely don't want that. Students having conversations with their peers. Exactly. Thank you guys so much for adding to this. Love all that you shared. And if you actually notice on the second page of the document that Jason put in, there are some of those indicators listed. And I'm just going to throw in a couple new ones for our virtual environment as well. So we know behavioral engagement in class, you know, they're studying, they're following the school rules, they're attending events and attending class on time. And virtually, that could look like just logging on, right? That's the first step, logging in, which I know some schools are struggling with right now. Commenting, emailing or posting activities, completing their assignments, some of these things that you guys have already hit on. Emotional engagement, again, is that comfort with peers, with teachers, asking questions, being inquisitive, just being all around curious and engaging in group learning. Online, that could be presenting yourself on camera again. That could be using communication features to give responses and feedback, not just to the teacher, but also to their peers. Seeking more support when it's needed, responding to their peers and beyond the virtual class session. So even extending their engagement outside of just what's happening in class. Maybe they reach out to a peer later and say, hey, do you have notes on this? Or what did you think about class today? And connecting with their teachers and peers, again, outside of the confines of the classroom. And cognitive engagement, again, is about desiring those challenges, self-regulating, monitoring. Some people talked about completing things on time. Evaluating one's own thinking and learning, being able to be metacognitive. And this could also look like managing your time and assignments even outside of the virtual classroom, right? Especially now that teachers aren't as hands-on as they usually are in class. Are students able to monitor their own pace and turn things in on time, make sure they're checking those boxes? Seeking additional resources other than what you give to them, making connections to the physical classroom and other classrooms where content might be relevant. So thinking about inside our classrooms, whether in person or virtually, behavioral, emotional, and cognitive engagement can be seen and identified in different ways. But also as a teacher, we could plan for some of these things. We can also think about how we want to get students prompting to do some of these things, even as we're facilitating a lesson. So how can I get students to feel comfortable asking questions? Maybe I have a question wall where they just type all their questions in there no matter what it is, or maybe I have a Google Doc that they can access where they can ask whatever questions they want without feeling like, you know, any question is a great question, you know what I mean? So how can you prompt some of this engagement no matter what the circumstances or situations are? Awesome. Looking at my chat just to see if I see anything happening, new happening. Again, feel free to use that chat. All right, so with that being said, let's talk about this cool engagement equation. So engagement by design, which we talked about earlier, which we got a lot of this research from, offered up this amazing equation, and really as an opportunity to look at the relationship between all the things that go into engagement, right? So engagement isn't just something that happens magically. And surprisingly, it's not just about the content that you put forward. There's actually some other factors here that lead to a holistic view of engagement. And these are the indicators that they put out there for us to consider in this equation. While I'm going through some of these, feel free to chat in the chat box like, oh, I never thought of that, or that's really interesting, or feel free to unmute yourself and, you know, just give your overall comments about some of these as we go through. So the first part of this engagement equation really talks about the student, the teacher, and the content. And really what this is asking is the student coming into the classroom ready to learn? Is the teacher ready to give this information and share their knowledge? And is the content going to meet them at their level of rigor and challenge them to do more? And that is like the fundamental part of engagement, right? Because we already know if teachers aren't prepared, how engaged can students be, right? You're going to be fumbling over your words. You don't really have what you want together, and it's not going to come across very well. And for our students, we already know if they don't come into the classroom ready and excited to get started, sometimes that engagement is super low. They're thinking about what they heard in the hallway or what they could do after school. So how can you get those students to come in ready to learn? And of course, if the content isn't challenging for them, they just, wipe out, right? They're just not even thinking about it. They can do it in 5 minutes and move on. And then the rest of their period is spent thinking about those other things that might be on their mind. So these fundamental aspects of student, teacher, and content, super important to even getting this engagement started. But then it has this cool, funky summation. And for all of my math teachers who know about, including David, who's on here, and sometimes we have had so many conversations about this equation. But the summation is really about starting where we start and how that is really manifesting itself throughout the entirety of our classroom environment. So if you know about summations, you know that if we start at the bottom, right, which is our starting point, if we start with identifying a student's self-worth and their purpose in the classroom, then everything that they do in building relationships or the clarity that they have with teachers and the challenge that they get is really all centered around them and what they want to do and how they feel connected to it. And that is really a core part of being engaged, is feeling like you have a purpose in it, feeling like this relates to you, feeling like you can use this later on and it be meaningful and purposeful. So that's what this summation is trying to get at. That if we put student purpose and student worth at the center of our relationships and at the center of the challenges that we give them, then students will be engaged because they feel a personal connection to it. And then the last key on here is about student voice. Do students have an opportunity to share their voice with their classroom, with their teacher? Do they feel like they can speak up when there's a challenge or when they have a new idea or when they want to investigate something? Those are really important opportunities for students to feel like they are engaged in their environment. If they're always being talked to, then they feel like, oh, well, if I wasn't here, she would just keep talking, right? So making them feel engaged in a part of the process makes them feel important, like they're contributors to this environment, and that will engage them at a whole new level. So any thoughts, any comments, any feelings about this engagement equation as we see it right now? We're going to dive deeper. Trust me, there's a lot of nooks and crannies in this little equation that we can get at. Don't be afraid to stop me. Stop me at any time. Like, hey, what about this? So as we break down this equation, we really have some key questions here that we're all going to explore in a group in just a second. But again, are students in the mindset to learn? Is the teacher prepared to facilitate student learning? Is the content accessible? Is it clear how you're going to discover this information together? Is there evidence of a healthy relation between students and teachers? Because relationship is important. There's plenty of students who come to a class and they don't feel like they have a connection with the teacher. If they don't feel like they have a connection with you, maybe they won't ask you for help. Maybe they won't ask you questions. And then they can't get to that next level of learning. Oh, I love this question. How are goals and influence in how engaged students are? I love that, because those, for me, goals are two parts of this kind of equation if we wanted to keep it here and talking about this equation. But goals can present the challenge, right? Is there a balance of difficulty and complexity? So are you setting goals, and are students setting goals that challenge them to get to the next level of their educational journey? And also about voice. Do students have an opportunity to voice their own goals? What is it that they want to get out of your classroom? How are they using your class to prepare for their next level? So I love that goals actually can be traced into a couple different areas into this equation. And if they feel like they are part of that goal setting and those goals are really related to them and challenging them, then they can continue to be engaged even more. So thank you for that question. Love that. All right, any other thoughts or comments? I'm just going to leave these questions on the screen here just for a second just to see if there are any other thoughts, comments. Feel free to unmute yourself or type them in the chat. I would love to hear out about some impressions, some first thoughts, or other questions that we have. Very true. I seen a comment. Some people have the ability to take negative energy and turn it into motivation to succeed. Absolutely. Sometimes we do have students who come in and they're really struggling emotionally or with whatever might be going on in their lives. How can that student use that to voice their goals or voice what they want to get out of your classroom, or find a place in that classroom where they feel comfortable with you? So you can definitely take those and motivate students to increase engagement. Anything else? I'm looking to the side because I'm looking at everybody's face on the screen. So I see thinking faces. I see some, I see a lot of those. All right, so if you're still with me, now we're going to go into actually using this equation for ourselves. So how many of you could just break into this equation, you know, throw in some numbers and really solve this thing out? Carla said. That's okay, Carla, because if you were like some of us non-math majors, even though I did have to take calculus 1, 2, and 3, but if you're like some of us, you're like, what is going on in this equation? I don't think I can really solve this. This thing looks crazy, right? This is a big chunk. So we've actually wanted to keep it simple, right? We've kind of broke it down and said, you know what, for the average person, let's just keep it simple. The summation is really a theoretical thing. The summation is really that idea about keeping student purpose and student self-worth at the center of creating relationships and challenge. So it's really an idea, right? But in order to make this practical, we wanted to just use some simple multiplication and addition. Carla is in agreement. With that being said, though, we've actually identified a way for you to simply plug and chug. And plug and chug is a really East Coast American term that's like plug in a number and then chug your way through the equation. But for everybody else, it's really just throw in the numbers that you think are appropriate and solve it using a calculator. So with that being said, we're actually going to put you guys into breakout groups, and we're going to give you some scenarios that you guys can read together, and you guys are actually going to calculate engagement. For those of you who are still intimidated by the math, trust me, I have made it super, super simple for you that all you have to do is type in a number. So Jason is actually going to give everybody access to this Google Sheets document. And each of you will be placed into groups. And for whatever group you are in, that is the Google Sheets page that you're going to go to. So if you're in group 1, you just click on the group 1 tab. If you're in group 2, you'll be in the group 2 tab. You'll know what group you are in once Jason has placed you into those groups. It'll say joining group 1 or joining group 2. So you'll know that once we put you into those groups. Here you're going to see a scenario A, a scenario B, and a scenario C. Depending on timing, maybe you only get through scenario A and B, and C could be a bonus that you get to after you have finished or if you have some time to discuss. For each one of these scenarios, you're just going to read through the prompt and you are going to decide, is there some engagement here or is there not? And this is how you're going to determine that. If you see no indication of one of these factors, you're going to type in a 0 into the score sheet. If you see a little bit of indication of this indicator, like you said, the teacher was kind of prepared today, right? You're going to type in a 1 into your sheet. And if you see high indication, meaning, oh yeah, the teacher was really prepared, the content was really challenging, students really had a voice, then you're going to type in a 2 into the sheet. And what you're going to notice is that as you go through and you type in your score, the score is going to be automatically calculated for you at the very end, and you'll all of a sudden have a score for engagement, okay? That being said, if your score is 0 to 6 and all of this is written at the top, that means there was a low level engagement. there's probably some things there that they could do in order to increase engagement, a significant amount. If you get from a 7 to 16, that's moderate engagement. Like students are pretty engaged. Maybe they could do 1 or 2 other things and this class will be, you know, skyrocket, right? And high engagement is between 17 to 28, 28 being the highest that you can score using this system. So if you see high engagement, this is really an opportunity where everybody's engaged, the challenge is there, the content is there, the student voice is off the wall, everything is working together to make an awesome, engaging kind of classroom environment, learning environment. Okay, as you guys finish out, feel free to have a discussion, you know, write some notes over here on the side about what you noticed, and also think about what low engagement classrooms could do in these situations in order to have higher engagement in their classrooms. So really think about which one of these areas could a classroom use to increase engagement the most in these situations. Okay, so once we all have an opportunity to do this, you'll have about 20 minutes or so. Then we'll all come back together and kind of talk through what we saw in these scenarios and share out how we averaged out some of these scores together. All right, with that being said, I'm going to let Jason whisk you away into your groups. Our team will be around to just, you know, observe. So if you have any questions about using the sheet or the scenarios, feel free to ask us while we're with you. One thing I'm going to ask you to do is don't make any assumptions. Only base your judgments on what you read, okay? So if it didn't say that students were doing something, don't assume that that's what they're doing. So really take these scenarios at face value. All right, so Jason, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, great. Yep, you're ready to go to breakout rooms. I'll let everyone know you're going to automatically go to the breakout room, and then you will come back, and I will send you messages about time as you go, so you can keep your attention on engagement and working through that equation. Okay, so you are magically going to go to your rooms. Have fun.
Welcome back, everyone. Everybody's starting to come back in. Awesome. So as we're all rejoining, hope you guys had an opportunity to dig into some of these scenarios and make some connections about this engagement and this equation. Hopefully you guys found it all easy to use this Excel sheet, and it made working through this equation a little bit easier. So I love all that everybody was able to at least get through those first 2 scenarios. Sorry, I wish we had more time where we can really dive into some more of those things. However, I did consolidate or average out our scores on this very first page. And it looks like between the 3 groups, that scenario A ranks in kind of that high engagement area, starting at 17, just a little above. It like really just hit the mark for high engagement. This is where I can tell who the mean teachers are and who the nice teachers are, because group 1 was like killing that first scenario. They were like 1, no, and like kind of like brushing through it. Christian, you know that's how you are. I saw your face. You were like, no. Where some of the other groups were like, oh yeah, twos, right? Like you could tell who. I see Carla's face. You can tell who the nice teachers are and who the really, really mean teachers are. So it lets me know whose class I want to be in next time. So with that average, scenario A was kind of that 17 point of high engagement. Scenario B was all the way at the bottom. You guys killed scenario B, and it was at a 4. Scenario C score is a little wonky because I think only 1 group was able to get in there and take a look at scenario 3. But just thinking about scenario A and B, I would love to hear some thoughts on what you saw in these scenarios. What do you think impacted the overall score the most? And just your overall thoughts on the engagement that came out in these scenarios. Feel free to unmute yourself at this point. I know typing that out might be a lot, so just feel free to jump in with your thoughts. What are some things that your group even discussed while you were in those groups? And create team, if you were in one of those groups and had some thoughts too, you know, feel free to share out. This was your first time actually seeing these scenarios as well.
I can go ahead and share a little bit of what we were talking about.
Thanks, Christian. You
we
were one of the
looking
mean
at-
teachers or the nice teachers? Okay, just go ahead.
As David said, we're authentic. We're giving authentic feedback. So looking at scenario B and kind of like why I was given such a low score and reflecting on that question as to like what can change to make this a little bit more engaging. And I think the biggest thing was giving some sort of way for students to have a voice in what they were doing. Because we saw in this scenario, there really wasn't any sort of like absolutely no evidence of student voice in the activity that they were doing. And so we're kind of just brainstorming a lot of different ways, and we realized there's a lot of different ways that a teacher can choose to do this. But any of those directions that they choose to go helps at least a little bit in that sense.
Thanks so much for bringing that out. Before I dive into that, anything else, Carla? I saw you unmute yourself.
Oh, I just, I work in middle school, and so we do a lot of academic not gaming, but, using GimKit or quizzes or, shoot a wad of paper into a garbage can or, whatever to make that, to help students to, review material. So they're probably different than if you were at a high school, but probably high school should get up and move too. So.
Absolutely. Did you notice anything, Carla, about, the impact here or what you saw in these scenarios or what your group kind of discussed too?
I mean, as far as the different scores?
Yeah.
Well, obviously the difference between A and B is to me all about compliance and just, I got to get a good grade because I got to get in a good, what did David say? Got to get in good grades to get into a good college to, all of, into that mindset. Versus compliance to just get it versus to want to learn how to do it, to want to learn and learn more. Versus A could be, I mean, the teacher was giving choice. And so if a student's really interested in learning something in particular about that subject, then they possibly could go down that road, more of a genius hour or things like that.
I love how you mentioned choice, because choice leads to voice, right? Students having some options leads to them being able to give their thoughts and opinions. So I love that. I would love one more. Anybody from group 2 or group 3 that would love to share what they were talking about? Go ahead, Holly, jump on in there. I saw you.
All right, sorry, thank you. All right, I was group 3 and had a great group, and we had a great conversation around scenario A, like really looking at the different types of thinking involved in the activities that they were doing, just that design, that building a model, and then actually able to communicate that what they were doing. And so that's a lot of critical thinking, a lot of collaborative work. So there are a lot of different ways to engage and to pull in different thinking abilities and thoughts. So that was a lot of what we had a conversation around.
I love that. Thank you, Holly.
Anyone else in the team want to shout out anything more?
Yeah, I was in group 3 and I made a comment, right? I made a disclaimer. I don't want to be prejudiced, but it seemed like it was a GATE class. And we talked about how, unfortunately, that should be every class, not just GATE or honors or AP classes. So that was something that I brought up, but that's a concern for me to even bring that up.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And you do notice that like different types of classes, right, get this different type of freedoms, right? You're in AP class, they have more opportunity to maybe expand, or maybe the general class only gets the lectures because they need to focus more or something like that. Like we make a lot of assumptions about these classes, but great teaching and great learning environments all look the same, or not look the same, but all have that same kind of feel of engagement, right? Where students can invoke their voice, where they can make choices, where they can engage with the material at their own level, no matter what level that might be. So I'm glad you brought that up, because the type of class shouldn't determine the engagement that's possible for those students, right? We should not give lower engagement just because we think that's what they need in order to reach their academic goals. So definitely love that you brought that up. All right, so with a little bit of time left, that kind of brings us to one of these misconceptions, because that's a misconception right there, is that, you know, the type of class you have determines how much activity that you can provide students, right? And we know that that's not the case. All levels, no matter elementary, middle school, high school, no matter if it's a general ed class or AP class, they should all be able to really engage with their material no matter what. Some other misconceptions that we just wanted to point out is that students and working in groups are always engaged, right? Your students in groups do not make them engage, right? The content, the teacher presence, the clarity, all those other things have to go into the engagement. So groups might make that more accessible for students to voice their opinions, but that does not always mean that students are engaged. You can have a bunch of students in a group who are talking about everything from Sunday to Monday except for your content, and then what, right? So you want to make sure that they're engaged while they're in those groups. Students who are on task are cognitively engaged, right? You can have a student with a pencil in their hand taking notes from the board and be completely thinking about what they want to eat for lunch. I do that often. Maybe a little bit doing it right now, like, oh, I could really go for a smoothie. So cognitive engagement, right? Just because they're on task does not mean they're cognitively engaged. So you want to pull from both spectrums. Engagement can only be obtained during exciting activities like experiments. And I would challenge that and say, engagement can be obtained during a bunch of different types of activities in different learning environments. It's about how much student voice are you given, how much do the students feel connected with the content that you're bringing forward. It's about so much more than just how you're presenting the material. Presenting the material is just one aspect of their engagement. So you want to build on that with all those other different things. And a misconception that lectures cannot be engaging. David was just speaking earlier. TED Talks are mostly all lectures, but when you get a really great TED Talk, right, that person makes you feel like they're there, like you're there. They make you feel a part of it. They're questioning you. Even if it's a rhetorical question, they're making you think. They're making you excited about it. So lectures can be more engaging. You just want to make sure you're enlisting other opportunities for student voice and student choice and getting them involved in the academic environment. A teacher could be standing at the front of the classroom presenting a lecture, but take 20 minutes of that lecture just to ask students how they feel about this topic. How would you solve for this? How could you teach this? Why don't you turn to your partner and you guys figure out what the solution could be before I go over it up here? So there are different opportunities for you guys to make lectures even more engaging when that lecture is appropriate for your classroom. So I see some comments in the chat coming in, appreciating the examples, love it, thanks Trent, glad you were able to make it. The learner might not have his or her way, but at least the same will have his or her say. Got you, Robert. I like that play on words, right? Or it's like, give students the opportunity to voice those opinions. Even if you don't have the capacity for every student to do what they want to do, at least they feel like they were a part of that conversation. And maybe later on, you might have that opportunity. So I know a teacher who was a part of our workshop that said, you know what, we have a wonder wall, so to speak, where students put all their ideas up there. And at the end of the unit, if we have like a week or two where, you know, it's a little bit more flexible, we pull some of those things off the wall and try to see if we can research those, right? So at least students feel like they have some kind of input there. So I love that. And it's not what you cover, it's how you uncover it. I love, these are all t-shirts. Jason, write all of these down. We're making all of these into t-shirts.
Warming up the press as we speak.
Exactly. These are all great t-shirts. It's how you uncover it. I love that. It's that era of mystery and discovery that is amazing. So yeah, bring some of the same energy into Create Cafe. I would love to just have any other comments or thoughts before we move into our closeout. I do want us to have time to get into our Create Cafe, and I'd love for you to bring some of those ideas in there with you. Looking to see if there were any. Love that, right, Holly? We're getting all these t-shirts. All our new TGR t-shirts are going to have your sayings on them. All right. Well, as we are moving forward, I want to remind you, like Jason said at the beginning, that this is a monthly digital workshop series. So today we were just trying to go a little bit deeper into engagement. And I hope all of us had an aha moment or something we can take back with us and really dig deeper into engagement. But next month on October 14th, we're going to have using questioning strategies in an inquiry classroom. Talk about engagement. One of the key ways you can get students engaged is by questioning them, because that's how you can open up that door and that portal for their voice to be heard. So Holly, who's on our call right now, was in some of your groups. She's going to be leading out that workshop. So we can't wait to see you guys back here for that opportunity. But stay connected with us. In the meantime, stay on. We're going to have about 15-20 minutes for our Create Cafe today to discuss some interests, some topics, or whatever the case may be. If there's anything that you're interested in, share that with us as well. Jason has also pasted in the link for registrations for the October website webinar, and David has typed in some stuff as well. I was trying to read it as I went through it. Thank you.
I just wanted to share a reminder that we also have a 4 p.m. session today of this great workshop. So if you have other colleagues and peers that would be interested, feel free to share within the link.
Very, very true. So we'll be back here at 4 o'clock. Same time, well, not same time, same place, same facilitator. There we go. Find all of our digital workshops, including this one, will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So search for us at TGR Foundation. Join our educator community if you're not already a part of it at the tgrfoundation.org/educator-community. So that you get all of our updates right away, right? You don't have to go through a middle person, but you'll be the first to know about all of our monthly workshops and the registrations as they open. And definitely find other resources that we have on tgreduexplore.org. Great website for you guys to use some already prepared lesson plans and things like that to help you spark some curiosity with yourself and your students and other educators. All right. With that being said, I believe Jason is going to paste a link to our survey in the chat. We ask that you please take the opportunity to complete that. Give me as much feedback as possible. You cannot hurt my feelings. I used to be a teacher. They said everything I've never wanted to hear. So feel free to please complete that, and we'll be sharing it in an email after the workshop as well. Thank you, David. All right. So with that being said, thank you, everyone. If you have a few minutes, please stay on and join us for Create Cafe as we have some informal conversations about today and any other topics you want to discuss. But if you can't stay, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next month.